Yo, what is cranking? What is shaking? Danglers, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to a brand new video. Today's video is going to be just a little bit different. So I think I'm going to start doing these type of videos twice a week. Essentially, so this past weekend, my buddy Jeremiah came over. We ended up doing a little bit of evening fishing and some morning fishing. And the main lure I was using through the whole entire weekend has been a 10-inch Mondo worm from Guggen Baits. As I'm catching fish on it, I end up catching my 20-inch bass on it, which is my biggest bass of the year so far. I used to make videos back in the day in 2020 showcasing like how to fish with certain lures, what to use, how to use them, just basically tips, tricks, and techniques essentially. And I want to get back into doing those type of videos again because I enjoyed those. Those were fun. And kind of what sparked the conversation, or kind of like what sparked the idea, was my buddy Jay, who doesn't really fish with, you know, a Texas rig or soft plastics as much. He doesn't really do much fishing with those. You know, he's just getting into fishing more and more the last few years. And through the help of myself, you know, he's been able to, you know, use different lures because I've taught him or showed him on how to do certain things. So this is kind of inspired by him, basically just showcase not only him for him, but also for many other people that just might not know how to fish with certain lures. So I want to do these videos about twice a week. That kind of fills in the gap. It just kind of fills in the gaps for the other videos, my main fishing videos, my tournament videos, and stuff like that. So today, what we're going to be covering is going to be the Mondo worm. So the 10-inch or 12-inch ribbon tail worm. I'm going to go over rigging. I'm going to go over techniques and where to throw for all of this. So stick around, stay tuned, enjoy. So a little bit of a backstory within the ribbon tail worm and how it came about. The early 1970s, anglers began wanting the worm that had more action than just a straight tail, because in 1949 Nick Cream's design was just a straight tail action. The curly tail grubs became popular, inspiring lure designers to experiment with longer flowing tails. Bassmaster credits the development of curly tail designs in the early 1970s as a stepping stone to the ribbon tail worm. Had the long tail, wiggly tail that we know and see and love today. So this lure has been around for multiple decades, and it has gone through a huge transition. Now, fun fact, my first bass I ever caught on an artificial lure was caught on a Berkeley Power Bait electric grape 8-inch ribbon tail worm. If you know, you know. Fantastic color, one of the sharpest colors I've ever seen. I have yet to see another brand. And realistically, where you want to be throwing these worms is around thick, deep grass, lily pads, and edges, transitions. So there's multiple ways to fish the ribbon tail worm. You can fish it weedless and let it just sink slowly down. For those most stubborn bass, and on those days where fishing is just a little bit harder, you can use that. Or my favorite is you can go a Texas rig. Now I always use either a 1/8 or a 1/4 ounce tungsten flipping weight that's in the front. And then usually what you want to use, because the worm is so long, usually you want to use either a 4 or a 5/0, ideally a 5/0 worm hook, EWG, which is what I have on here right now. And as you can see, even with it being, this one's a 4/0 hook, but with it even being a 4 or a 5, you still have a good amount of length for this lure. So as you're fishing it, you know, a big thing to keep in mind as you're fishing it is when you get that bite, it's our initial reaction to just want to immediately rip it back and set the hook. The problem is with that is that usually the bass take the tail first and they gobble it right there. They take it again, they take it again, they take it again, and then they finally get to the hook. What most anglers do, and this is where I've seen a big mistake happen, and even over the weekend I had a couple of these as well, and then my buddy Jay had a couple examples as well, where he felt the bite immediately and he rips it. With that being the case, the fish only had the tail end. So the moment that he pulled back, he had the fish on, but the fish was never hooked. The hook never came out of the soft plastic, the hook never went into the fish's mouth. So a big thing that you want to do when fishing with these is, because you're not going to use a hook that's going to go all the way down here by any means. There's not a big enough hook for that. What you're going to do is, once the fish bites it and you feel the bite, you're going to let it run with it, and you're going to count to 3. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And what you're doing during that whole entire time is really simple. Once you feel that bite, just reel in slowly. Just keep tension on that line and just keep remembering. Count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. On the 3rd Mississippi, take one small reel and yank it back and set the hook. The reason why I use a 1/8 or a 1/4 ounce compared to a 3/8, if you're fishing deep cover, very, very thick and deep cover grass, and you want to basically kind of punch through that grass as quick as possible, you're going to want to use something a little bit heavier. A 3/8 is the best way to go. But for me, I like to fish with a 1/8 or a 1/4. 1/8 if the water is very calm, there's not a lot of wind, I'm not very pressured or anything like that. I can let that lure sink down very slowly and essentially sit on top of the grass. It won't actually go too deep or too thick into the grass, and I can just pop it right on top. Now, 1/4 is a little bit heavier. This is going to cut through just a little bit more of the grass as I'm fishing it. Now, it's not going to go fully through the grass. I'm going to get caught up still on top most of the time. But typically, on average, I'll be throwing the 1/4 more than the 1/8. Because a lot of the times the conditions are just going to be more prominent for the 1/8, or sorry, for the 1/4. There's going to be a little bit of wind. There's the things to factor in. So I got to make sure that I don't want my lure just going all over the place. So still doing a 1/4 is still pretty good. But again, if you're fishing the deep, thick, I mean absolute thick, deep cover, you're going to want to be using a 30. You're going to want to be using a 3/8 tungsten flipping weight right in the front. Again, pair it with a 4 to a 5/0 hook, and you'll be golden. You can fish this multiple different ways. You can fish it with a weight head. You can fish it weightless. The biggest areas that you want to fish it in is in deep cover grass, transition points, and lily pads, where these bass are simply hiding during the mid-summer to late summer months when the water is much higher in temperature. The bass fishing gets a little bit harder. You're not going to typically catch a lot of fish off of like the crankbaits and jerk baits, the hard baits. You got to go a little bit more finesse. Now, let's get into how to fish it. You know, we talked about fishing it Texas rig. You can Carolina rig these. You know, if you're feeling a little spicy and you want to pop some things off on the bottom and fishing about 15 plus feet of water. You can fish it weightless for the more stingy bass that are out there. But we haven't really talked about actually how to fish with the worm. So a couple ways that you can fish this. Obviously with a ribbon tail, you can do a slow retrieve. So let it sink, slowly retrieve it, let it drop, slowly retrieve it, and you can fish it that way. Or obviously as a Texas rig, you can do a flipping and pitching style. So you can flip it and pitch it into some grass cover and let it sink to the bottom and then pop it, let it sink to the bottom and pop it. Now, depending on how the fish are reacting, sometimes you can go pretty quick with the popping and you can fish it very quickly. Now, on some days where fishing might just be a little bit harder and the fish are not as easy or eager to bite the lure, you might have to fish it a little bit slower. You might have to keep it on the bottom just a little bit longer for that strike to initiate. However, either way is fine. But my preferred method of fishing it is not retrieving it and let it slowly sink. My preferred method is flipping and pitching into cover, into pads, into heavy grass, letting it sink, waiting a few seconds, popping it up, letting it sink, popping it up, letting it sink, popping it up. And usually if I'm not getting anything on the, fourth or fifth pop, I'll reel it back in and cast right back out there. This lure has been forgotten, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to end up throwing it, just to see how well and how effective it is. I haven't fished with a ribbon tail worm, especially a large ribbon tail worm, for quite some time. It's been years, but I can honestly say after this past weekend, this is on my setup for the next month and a half now, because of the way that it produces, the bites that I was getting. There's many different ways to fish it, and it's such an old time classic, man. You can't go wrong with these. They're classics for a reason. They do well for a reason. And again, most people forgot about them. Now, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. Do you fish with a ribbon tail worm or not? And if you haven't, are you going to after this video? And if you haven't seen my biggest bass of the year caught, I recommend go watching that video. I'll have it somewhere here on the video right now for you to see. But that was caught on a Guggen bait 10-inch Mondo worm. All I'm saying is they catch biggies. Mondo baits catch some big bass. So again, hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe as always. And remember, keep on fishing, make one last cast, and I'll catch you guys on the water. Let's go.